From downstate. He regularly attends meetings, goes to rallies, speaks out in favor of our issue. Tonight he's going to present to us some information that he's researched on environmental issues, energy issues. It's a very informative presentation he has. So please welcome Jlcny.
It's been long 6 years. Many of you knew me from 6 years ago. I look around the room, I recognize most of you. You were 6 years younger then, and so was I. And we are still struggling. This is my little place, by the way, in the Catskills. And I love it. It's a little stream, nothing fancy, nice, pristine, clean, got trout in it, got frogs, but the future is unclear. I don't need to preach to the choir. Jobs, economy, jobs. I want to make a note here. We used to be importing 1.5 million barrels of oil a day. Now we are down to under 1 million. That means we are keeping a lot of the money home. And that's all due to shale drilling. Part of that is gas, part of that is shale oil. And we used to be paying $200 per barrel. Now it's down to about 95 bucks. So we are on the way to energy independence. And the nation could use a little bit more help from New York. We all know about the problems with oil. We are dependent on it. It comes with risk. And as we speak, we have a situation going on in Iraq. And that's all because of this stuff. And not to mention what happened in the Gulf. And of course, natural gas is the cleanest energy source there is today outside of hydropower. With hydro, we basically have fully optimize our opportunities. We are doing a lot with it. About 20% of our power is coming from hydro, and that's it. And about 5% is coming from renewables, and we can do a lot with natural gas, except that Hollywood doesn't really want us to go into natural gas. You all familiar with this guy? By the way, we all know the methane in well water is natural. Not too many people know that it is non-toxic. We all know that. But outside of this room, if you ask people about methane, they say, whoa, that's nasty stuff. The other side has been purposefully keeping it a secret that methane is harmless, non-poisonous. However, they keep on saying contamination, contamination, contamination. 243 cases of methane contamination in Pennsylvania. Oh, we cannot put up with that. But we all know it's harmless. It's natural. Once that dissipates, it is drinkable water. By the way, don't hesitate to ask questions. Stop me anytime you want. Just a word about biofuel. I want to use that as an example as to why we are in trouble here. We turn a lot of good food into gasoline at significant cost. the amount of gasoline we produce from corn does not pay for the process. And in the process, we are polluting our water. Pure politics. And as I go into solar panels, the same story repeats. Wind, it actually works. When the wind is blowing, it generates electricity. The only problem about wind turbines, well, a few things. Number one is intermittent, we all know that. The other problem is today, wind turbines are built using rare earth elements. And rare earth elements are extremely polluting. Basically, you have to dig deep down to the radioactive minerals and extract from the magnets, the magnet ingredients from the radioactive material. And this is what happens in China. I understand they have to dig up tons and tons and tons of radioactive material in order to extract a small amount of material for producing the magnets. And what happened? All that material that is dug up, they fill in the front there is actually a lake. The lake is now a dry lake because they put all that radioactive material there. So I don't have to mention to you what happened to the population living around the lake. But we don't see it here. All we see is the graceful spinning of the windmills. Very graceful, slow motion. And meanwhile, on the other side of the world, people are in pain. We don't feel it. All we see is the slow motion, generating clean energy. And on the other side, they have cancer villages. We don't see it. Now, I'm not too sure too many of us want to live in that kind of environment. But that's what they're proposing, the other side. Quite actually, the other side is not really too fond of that either. Bobby is the first one to be against wind when it comes to his neighborhood. And in fact, some of you might have read a study in Buffalo University. They talk about fragmentation of the forest. If we drill wells, we have to build the access roads. So when you build the access roads and put in the well paths, you're fragmenting the forest. That cannot be tolerated. Yet, what are they doing with the windmills? They clear the entire mountaintop. They have no problem with that. Oh, my dear friend, the hope. This system cost the installer $40,000. That's what Mr. Ruffalo mentioned to the press in the beginning. And then later he mentioned that, oh, it's $25,000. And he himself paid $9,000. So who paid the rest? You and me, $31,000. Now, hold on. When it is $40,000 on the market, it did not account for all the federal subsidy that went into the manufacturing of the panels. So the rule of thumb, actually, 70% of the cost is absorbed as federal subsidy. So this thing here cost the taxpayers $120,000. And the guy's smiling. Of course, he paid $9,000 for $120,000 of material. But he should not be smiling because he's only getting $1,200 a year in savings. What kind of math is it? Now, this is why we are in trouble. And this is why I am running for the assembly. Take a look at the subsidy. By the way, these numbers came from the Energy Information Administration. And they did not voluntarily produce these numbers. It was under the Freedom of Information Act. People asked, how much federal subsidy are you putting in on energy? Grudgingly, they produced those numbers. So the question was posed in 2012, and they dug up the 2010 numbers. And I could not find any other information since. Anyway, this illustrates the point. The subsidy on natural gas, tiny bit. Subsidy on coal, tiny bit. This comes from the government, so that's as authentic as you can get. Hydropower, a little bit of subsidy. Nuclear, now we are getting some subsidy. And geothermal, a lot of subsidy. Wind, huge subsidy. And then solar. It went through the roof because it says solar is not to scale. Wind subsidy is $56. Solar is 15 times as much as wind. That is a lot of money. And let me say this again. A lot of free money for the lobbyists, for the manufacturers, for the non-profits, for the politicians. That is a lot of money. And money drives behavior. And this is the fundamental problem as to why some of our friends are losing their land today. The subsidy. If it were not for the subsidy, the blue blood people would not be so anxious to influence state policy. They would not have driven the environmentalists to fight against clean energy being natural gas. They have to fight natural gas, otherwise they would not get that subsidy. Now, I do not know what the total subsidy is in the federal government. What I do know, however, in New York State, we just committed $1 billion to New York Sun program. That is a lot of money from a state that has no economy around here. And Wall Street is the only thing we got downstate. And we are able to afford $1 billion. And that is, the $1 billion is only what is published. We have a lot of hidden subsidies in terms of mandates. When we tell the power companies that they have to pay expensive electricity as part of the makeup, that's another form of subsidy that you and I are paying. And it is not calculated as part of this subsidy. And I'll get into that a bit later. By the way, where's the subsidy going? Where are the manufacturers? China. This is in 2010. China only got about half of the business. And then you have Taiwan, Japan, Germany, United States. United States got 4.6% at that time. That was when we had several factories going on. That's when we had Solindra going. That's when we had ABAM going. Today, those are gone. We only got First Solar and a few smaller manufacturers. So that number dwindles. Meanwhile, China, you see, whatever they say in Japan, whatever they say in Taiwan, the factory actually is in China. Why? No rules, no environmental safeguard. And I'll get into that later. But bear in mind that billions and billions of subsidy, it is not staying here. It goes, number one, into the lobbyists, into the whoever's on the take, into the middleman, and the rest go offshore. Stanford study. They did a study, the only serious study that I have read about, where they actually calculate how much energy is used to produce solar panels. We are putting more energy into producing the solar panel systems than the panels are producing over the lifetime. It's producing no energy. Let me emphasize that. No net energy. The energy, where does the energy come from for producing the solar panels? They burn coal. So in order to reduce the carbon footprint here in the good old US of A, we are increasing the carbon footprint elsewhere in the other hemisphere. Do you think the carbon dioxide stay in that hemisphere?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I think global warming only affects the other side. It doesn't come here. By the way, actually I don't want to use the word global warming. It's controversial, but I'll stay with the word pollution. Pollution does not stay on the other side. We only have one hemisphere. By the way, I have read many studies done by various universities, various research institutes, and they all come back and say, depending on who sponsored them, they would say the energy would be recouped within 1 year, recouped within 2 years, and therefore by the 3rd year, you're going to have clean energy, carbon-free, forever. Which is a good story to tell. I have dissected those papers. One common theme of those papers, they all quote each other. So when you take a look at the data they use to come to the conclusion, it's a long list of other papers. And the other trick they use is that they use a lot of scientific jargon, a lot of formulas, a lot of theory up front. 3, 4, 5 pages of it. And then after I spend all that energy reading through all those theory, and then comes back to the end where they get the data from, other papers. Let's get a little bit technical. In order to produce solar panel, which is typically polysilicon, for every part of solar panel material that we produce about 3 or 4 parts of toxic waste. Silicon tetrachloride. This is important. If we use all that energy to produce 1 part of solar panel material, and then you have the toxic waste next to it, what do we do with it? we can neutralize it, we can treat it. In Germany, they try to do that. Here in the US, we try to do that in the beginning. It uses a lot of energy. It does not pay. As I said, the solar panels themselves do not produce that much energy. It does not work. So, the only cheap way to make it work is to export the manufacturing, where all that toxic material does not get treated. They may just bury it in a shallow grave, or where I came from, they dump it in open fields in the hillsides. So then they can sell it to us cheap. And that is the reason why Solyndra went belly up. That's why A-bound went belly up. We cannot compete. And the same thing with Germany. Germany was the pioneer in solar panel manufacturing. They closed their factories too. I think they might still have one factory. That one may not be producing the raw material, by the way.
No.
Okay, all the raw material is produced in countries, the people of which the livelihood, health, safety, we don't care. We got a beautiful solar panel on our roof. Who cares if the other side of the world are suffering from cancer? Voice of conscience. In California, there's an organization called Silicon Valley Toxic Coalition. And it is an environmentalist group. They have been studying solar panel pollution for a few years now. And they came up with a scoring system as to the manufacturing practices of the various companies globally. And on this list, you're not going to be able to see the scoring, but if you go onto their website, you would see that many of the US manufacturers are among the worst offenders in terms of environmental practices. Again, it's Silicon Valley Toxic Coalition. Go onto their website. Now, they are careful not to attack the industry too openly. But if you read between the lines, you know what they're saying is that it is a dirty business. Just want to mention, pollution is not limited in Asia. Here in the US, for the remaining factories that we have, in California alone, they reported 48 million pounds of toxic waste, most of which is cadmium-laced sludge, which is cancer-causing. And that is shipped, buried across the country. Most of it stay in California. Why do they stay in California? Because they could bury it in the mountains. By the way, when I say 48 million pounds, that's only 1/3 of the manufacturers. The other 2/3 did not bother to report. So the actual amount of toxic waste is much higher. Okay, I want you to bear that in mind when someone asks you about frack water, which is really not something you want on your lawn, but on the other hand, it's mostly benign household chemicals that cannot compare to the cancer-causing cadmium sludge that is produced.
The 48 million pounds is in what time frame?
From the beginning.
From the beginning, okay, thanks.
The beginning was not that far ago, about 2010, 2027, that's when they started. So most of it was from more recent vintage. And then needless to say, once they go belly up, the taxpayers inherited the earth. And all those solar panel manufacturing sites, by the way, were considered Superfund sites. Recycling. Solar panel do leach toxins when they start to disintegrate. Not too much, but they do leach toxins. And in Europe, there is a compulsory recycling program. In the US, we have no recycling program. So what does that mean? That means that once we retire them, it goes straight to the landfill and get buried, and then it would start leaching toxins. Now, you might say, let's make it compulsory to recycle. Well, in Europe, when they have a compulsory program, they only collected 20% of what they were supposed to collect. It does not work. I was born in China, and this is what they're doing to my home country. And actually, that's one of the reasons why I'm here. They really messed that place up. In China, 20% of the cropland has been contaminated. Now, not all of that is from solar panel manufacturing. It is a combination of rare earth extraction, solar panel manufacturing, making TVs for us, producing all other goods for us. But solar panel manufacturing, windmill manufacturing play a big part in contaminating 20% of the cropland over there. And what it doesn't say is that 60% of the water in China is contaminated today, based on the Chinese news agency. Now, I pick on China because I came from there. In India, they're starting to expand their solar panel manufacturing capabilities. Huge factories being built. Yes, they're getting polluted. And same thing is true for the Philippines. And I'm sure it's going to spread to the other countries over there because we have this appetite for solar panels here. Well, appetite that's induced by our tax subsidies, federal subsidies. Again, I want to emphasize this point. The reason we have all these problems today, all that energy policy is influenced by the lobbyists. The more subsidies you give to a certain industry, the more lobbyists you breed with that subsidy. And the more lobbyists you have, they would encourage our politicians to give them even more subsidies and suppress domestic energy. The reason I want to pick on Germany is Inge gave me a lot of background information on how successful it has been in Germany. After all these years, after converting a lot of the farmland to solar panel farms and installing a lot of windmills, all they're producing is 12.4% of the total output. So right now, they are very good customer of ours. They're importing coal from Ohio. Coal that is too dirty for domestic use, we are shipping to Germany.
That's good.
I do not take pleasure in making that statement, but that's what happened when you have a blind energy policy. I want to use another example. This one is from one of my school districts. Someone secured 125 grand to put a solar panel system on top of the roof of the school. And they were extremely proud of it. This clean energy, efficient energy. I did a little calculation based on the report that they produced. They're saving $4,000 a year on 125 grand of investment. Now, as I said before, when they pay 125 grand, it does not take into account of the federal subsidies that went into the solar panels. So the actual system is about 300 grand, and we are getting $4,000 per year back. That means it would take forever before we can recoup the money. And the problem is solar panels only last 20, 25 years. So we'll never get our investment back. Not only that, how about all the pollution caused in Asia? Not only that, who is going to take down the system? Who's going to do the recycling and spend the money? It does not make sense. I want to use another example, also for Long Island. We have something called the Pine Barrens on Long Island. This is an area that we protect, zealously protect. There's actually a Pine Barrens society that guard this place, this entire area. And this is ecologically extremely important. Number one, our aquifer is sitting right below it, of course. So all the rainwater will go into the aquifer, provide drinking water. And it also has a lot of endangered species living there. And look at what they did. They clear-cut it. Pine trees wiped out to put solar panels there. Now, I probably won't mind too much if you put solar panels there, give me some energy, reduce my utility rate. I would not be complaining too much. But it produces 5 megawatt of power, making this a toy project. A toy. $200 acres of protected woodland we destroyed to support someone's hobby.
How did they get the authorization, or who gave the authorization to do that?
The Department of Energy says this is a Department of Energy project. Therefore, Mr. Pine Barrens Society, you have no business here. We do what we want. Now, I did a little calculation. If you really love the Pine Barrens project, then how about let's completely go over to solar energy for all of Long Island. And based on my calculation, if you want to generate enough energy to support all of Long Island, basically you have to cover all of Pine Barrens with solar panels. And if you do that, We get rid of all the pine trees, drinking water would taste a little funny. And based on my calculations, everybody will be paying $8,300 a year for electricity. And it won't work, by the way, because electricity would only be there when the sun is shining. So what does that mean? We have to put batteries there. But if you want to put batteries there, you probably want to cover the rest of the county with batteries. And how much money that would cost? I wouldn't even try to calculate. I want to compare Pine Barrens with a real power plant. We have DEC just authorized the building of Cricket Valley natural gas power plant. With natural gas, you come to 6 cents per kilowatt hour. With solar, 34 cents. Very simple math. One works, one doesn't. Island Park, Google's pride and joy. Oh, by the way, some blue blood family from the Northeast had a big financial interest in there. Good part of the valley floor covered with mirrors, reflecting heat into heat collecting towers. $1.6 billion of our money, federal money, our money, went into this project. And by the way, I saw some huge numbers. This was only the number that they admitted to. Several $1 billion more were spent on this project. It produces 75 megawatt of electricity. Cannot compare to natural gas power plant. They have endangered tortoises over there. And what happened to the tortoises? Wiped out. Well, theoretically, they transplanted them, but you and me know that transplantation meaning extermination. And of course, you heard about birds getting fried. Okay. When they're complaining about disturbing 4 acres, 5 acres for a well pad, look at what they're doing to the valley floor. Leveled. A little comparison. Island Park against natural gas. The cost for supplying electricity to each home is about $30,000 compared to natural gas, 1.6. And this $29,000 does not include the cost of the transmission line. It does not work. It does not work. It's polluting. Why do we want it in New York State? Subsidies. Subsidies. My money, your money, going into subsidizing the solar panel interests, going into subsidizing the pollution of Asia. And when you take all that money out of the state, forget about our economy. Do we really want this to happen here? Polluting the land. Okay? The politicians have been singing praises of building solar panel factories here. Do we really want it? That's our favorite topic. There's only one solution. Natural gas. It's clean. And create jobs. It's clean. I want to mention something here. Where I live on Long Island is actually an affluent community, very affluent. And they have one common complaint. Taxes are too high. And in fact, the taxes are so high, the small businesses are struggling. And even in such an affluent neighborhood, young people find it difficult to find jobs. And yet, our politicians still do not want to develop the natural resources that we have. They want to build casinos. Is it going to help? New Jersey just closed 3 of theirs. It's not going to help us. The only thing that I can see, 2 things. Number 1, we have to make our state really, really business friendly. We cannot have all these agencies tripping over each other and stopping every business process, program that is proposed. And to give us a kickstart, let's develop our natural resources. So here's my sales pitch. If I get elected, I'm going to impose or sponsor legislation to regulate the solar panel industry, to make sure that we have sound manufacturing practices, to make sure that we have recycling, to make sure that all that toxic waste is properly treated. I actually like renewables. At some point, with proper research, it will work. So we have to continue to devote resources to research. But until the technology is mature, for the sake of our environment, let's not continue this polluting manufacturing practice and reaching no one but the pocket of the lobbyists. I have toured the state extensively, and I've toured Pennsylvania after gas development. It's beautiful over there, beautiful. After all the dust has settled, they reclaim the land, and this is what you see. I took this picture. It's beautiful. And as for New York, you and me know how it looks like.